The familiar strains of Alice in Chains. I love them, but you know that. So the title is Diet, Inflammation, and Death. Why diet and inflammation and death? Well, all kinds of things can cause inflammation, injury, for example, or infection. But because of the way in which we live today, for most people, the most important cause of chronic inflammation is diet. We are eating a very toxic diet indeed. So our diet causes chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation leads to illness and death. It's a very tightly linked series. And one of the ways in measuring just how extensive this problem is to look at our public health figures. Now, I started off years and years ago just with a single slide of diseases, and then over the years, it multiplied. I ended up with 4 or 5 slides of different diseases, all of which show the same thing. They're all increasing in frequency. We're seeing more and more of them, and they're decreasing in latency. We're seeing them at younger and younger age groups. And then I thought, this is too much detail to go into. Let's just boil it down to its most simple, essential components. And you can see here, these are all different kinds of diseases. They're all very, very different. They affect different parts of the body. They're treated by different drugs. They're seen by different specialists. And all of them are becoming more frequent. And you know what? When we look at people who are still supposedly healthy, who don't yet have the signs of these diseases, we find that between 20 and 30% of them have preclinical signs of those diseases. So for all of the huge and increasing numbers of people who have non-alcohol-related fatty liver disease, what we find when we look at a healthy population, or at least they look healthy, they think they're healthy, we find that about 30% of these young people have NASH, which is the preclinical precursor of NAFLD. And now what we're finding is that when you look at young to middle-aged people who don't think they have any problems with their bones, when you look at them in detail, what we're finding is they're starting to show signs of osteopenia and even osteoporosis. So these diseases are appearing in younger and younger age groups, all of them are increasing, and all of them are emerging in younger and younger groups of patients. And the secret is out. This was acknowledged by the US Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation. It's a study that they publish in The Lancet once every year, and every year it's pretty much the same answer. It's poor diet that's causing all this. It's poor diet that is the single most important cause of early death, which means preventable death, all over the world. Now, just this year, we've seen a whole series of studies looking at the negative effects of ultra-processed foods. The kinds of foods that the multinational food companies, who control almost 80% of the global food space, offer to us in the supermarkets. And it turns out that they're very toxic indeed. I know you like them, I know you buy them in huge amounts, you give them to your kids, but when you look at the data that's been generated only this year, that every 10% increase in your consumption of these ultra-processed foods is associated with a 10% increased risk of cancer and a 14% risk of early preventable death. These foods are dangerous. And more detailed study, which has only just come out, it turns out that if you eat 4 servings of ultra-processed food a day, that increases the risk of early death by 62%, and each additional serve by another 18%. So if you're eating 6 servings of ultra-processed foods a day, and plenty of people do that, that doubles. That's a 100% increase in your risk of preventable and early death. It's shortening our lifespans, and it's shortening our lifespans all around the world. Not just us, but lab rats too. When you take these same ultra-processed foods and you feed them under controlled conditions to laboratory rats or mice, what you find is they suffer, they get sick, and they die early just in the same way that we do. What you find is that the aging of the immunological system accelerates. They have far more inflammation. They have more heart disease, more cancer, and a vastly increased risk of sepsis. That's when you have an infection that gets into the bloodstream and becomes overwhelming. Sepsis has a high mortality rate in rats and in humans too, because our antibiotics are wearing out. And for these reasons, because ultra-processed foods are so dominant in the food space now, we're starting to die at the population level younger. So you know, I think, that for the last 3 years, life expectancy has been falling in the United States. Now, they spend more than any other country in the world on healthcare. And about 20 years ago, they were in the top 5 in terms of average life expectancy. They are just about to fall out of the top 50 in terms of life expectancy, because it doesn't matter how much money you spend on healthcare. If people are poisoning themselves every day with the food that they eat, all the drugs, all the surgeons, all the medicine in the world is not going to be able to remedy that. Now, you have heard, I'm sure, of the fact that many more young Americans are dying with overdoses or committing suicide. That's actually also related to their diet. The diet which causes inflammation in the brain, which destroys motivation, creates depression, reduces impulse control. It's all connected. But it isn't just those problems. Diabetic complications, because so many Americans have diabetes. Neurodegenerative disease, so many more of them are developing dementia. Half of them seem to be in politics. Oh, no, I wasn't talking about Mr. Trump. He's a terrible president, but he was the best candidate. I mean, no doubt about that. But what I want to show you is that it's just as it was in the lab rats. When we look at what more and more people are dying of, sepsis, because people's immune systems are breaking down, because you're poisoning yourselves. They're poisoning themselves in particular with all of the ultra-processed foods they eat. Now, when those figures came out, I made a public prediction that Britain would be the next, and that's exactly what has happened. In Britain, for the last 2 years, life expectancy has been falling, and you know what? It's exactly the same patterns of increasing disease that we're seeing in Britain that we saw in the United States. And some of you who heard me talk about this before, I made a prediction about a year ago saying that the next countries where we're going to see life expectancy starting to fall are Germany, Ireland, Finland, and Poland. And the reason for that is very simple. Americans consume almost 60% of all of their calories in the form of ultra-processed foods. Britain comes next at about 52, 53%, but then that's 50.7. It's actually higher than that now. It's about 52%. But look who is the next in line. And you can see here, it's Germany, 46.2. And it's Finland at 40.9, Ireland at 45.9. And these figures are moving from north to south and from west to east as the multinational food companies roll their toxic products down across Europe. And there isn't any political party or any individual politician who sees this catastrophe, who understands it, or is willing to stand up and do anything about it. I said that Germany is going to be the next in line, and that was corroborated by a statement from the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research. This was in 2018, just last year. And for those of you who can read German, you can read the German. For everybody else, Germany now has the lowest life expectancy in Europe, and it's going to start going south within the next 2 to 3 years. We're killing ourselves with these terrible foods that we eat because they cause inflammation. Now, the omega-6s and omega-3s play an important part of this. And the reason is, you need to have inflammation. You need to be able to mount an inflammatory response if you have an inflammatory challenge, which could be an infection, it could be an injury. So the body starts the inflammatory sequence, and the omega-6s are involved in starting that inflammation. That's like the accelerator on a car. But once you have enough inflammation and you've removed the damaged tissue, now you need to stop the inflammation and heal and rebuild new healthy tissue, and that's where the omega-3s come in. The omega-3s come in, and they're like the brake on the car. So the omega-6s are the accelerator, the omega-3s are the brake, and you need to have them both. You need to be able to mount that inflammatory sequence and then stop it when you have had enough. But the problem is, as you know, and we know this more than anybody else does in the world, we have hugely excessive 6-to-3 ratios because of these grotesquely irresponsible food companies. that are poisoning us with their shoddy processed foods. 15 to 1 on average in Europe, 25 to 1 on average in the United States. So this sequence, the inflammasome, and this is the area around the cell when the cell does its thing, it creates its inflammatory sequence, and then it releases enzymes out into the tissues around the cell, and that is where the rubber meets the road. That's where inflammation starts to damage tissue, because it's this two-stage process. In the first stage, the omega-6s and omega-3s. The problem is, if you've got too many 6s and not enough 3s, you start shedding exosomes, and we have far too much 6s and not enough 3s, so we shed these exosomes, and they release enzymes called matrix metalloproteases, which are released outside the cell and start to destroy the extracellular membrane. This is where the tissue destruction starts, whether it's cartilage, bone, the linings of arteries, your lungs. It's the same process everywhere. The aging of skin, the same process. So it's just as well, because these enzymes are so destructive, that if you eat a healthy diet which contains polyphenols, that those enzymes are modified, they're moderated, they're kept under control. But here's the problem. We have far too high a 6-to-3 ratio. Thank you, Nestle. Thank you, PepsiCo, General Mills, Nabisco. Thank you, Danone. These are the people who are killing you. And so what that means is that the first half of this sequence is running far too hot. And then the polyphenols have gone, so these enzymes are being released, and they destroy the matrix, and that causes inflammation. But there's something else about this diet that is causing us problems. You see, if you have a healthy diet with prebiotic fibers, your gut is full of these green bacteria, gram-positive bacteria, which are anti-inflammatory. But the modern ultra-processed diet takes those prebiotic fibers away. The green bacteria, the gram-positive species, die, and they're replaced by red. That's gram-negative, and they cause chronic inflammation. So we have chronic inflammation in the gut as well. These are the people who are killing us. They're giving us this very high 6-to-3 ratio. They take away the polyphenols. They take away the prebiotics, so you have inflammation in the gut. They take these away, so your immune system can't cope. These compounds are highly pro-inflammatory. Their processed foods are very, very high in these toxic compounds. And then they stuff their foods full of sugar. Have you any idea how much sugar there is in your processed foods? Well, sure, you know how much sugar there is in classic Coke, or jam, or soda of any kind, or a cake. But what about something like tomato ketchup? You think it's a savory food. Look how much sugar there is in tomato ketchup. They cover up the sugar with vinegar and spices, but it is full of sugar. It just shouldn't be there. It doesn't have to be there, but it adds bulk, and it's a preservative, so they use it. And that means that you have a high glycemic index, which causes chronic inflammation. All of these things are causing chronic inflammation. So let's take a universal man or woman. What's happening to this person when they eat an ultra-processed diet? Well, the first thing that is going wrong is they have a 6-to-3 ratio that is far too high, and the polyphenols have gone, so they have chronic inflammation in, let's say, in the joints, in the heart, in the liver, in the lungs, in the brain, causing depression, neurodegenerative disease. This is a sick person because of the ultra-processed foods. But the problem is the ultra-processed foods have also taken away the prebiotics. So the bacteria in the large intestine are not gram-positive, they are gram-negative, and now you have chronic inflammation in the gut as well. So we add balance oil. That rectifies the 6-to-3 ratio. It adds the polyphenols. It reduces chronic inflammation in the body, but it doesn't really do anything for the large bowel. What you have to do there is to add xenobiotic. Xenobiotic is designed to stop chronic inflammation in the large bowel. It restores it to normal because it puts the prebiotics back into the diet. So once again, the green bacteria, the gram-positive, the healthy species, predominate, and they tell the gut, don't be inflamed. Everything starts to calm down. We use this very complicated blend, short chain, medium chain, long chain, and that means, of course, that when you eat this blend and the blend enters the colon, the short chain molecules ferment first, and then the intermediate chain, the longer chain, and the longest chain. You're changing the microbiome throughout the whole gut. How much of this fiber should you eat? Well, the WHO thinks that you should eat 30 grams of fiber a day, but that's all of the different fibers. The average diet actually contains only half that, 15 grams, and out of that, only 3.5 grams is prebiotic fiber, and those are the fibers that count. They're the fibers that change the microbiome. So the WHO are actually implying we should eat 7 grams of prebiotic fiber a day, and that is exactly how much there is in 1 scoop of xenobiotic. I think 1 scoop is the entry-level dose. I think 2 scoops is what you should be taking because that changes the entire microbiome. What actually will it do for you? Well, the WHO say that if you eat 30 grams of fiber a day, you will reduce the risk of early death by as much as 30%. That's how important the microbiome is. Breaking it down, it protects you in all kinds of ways. If you're eating this level of fiber, and as I said, only 12.5 grams of that is prebiotic fiber. If you're eating that much, 2.5 grams of that is prebiotic fiber, it reduces the risk of cancers, heart attacks, and strokes. This is extremely protective. And so that's what we have designed Xenobiotic to do, to give you protection in this way which complements the anti-inflammatory effects of the balance oil. They're designed to be used together. I know that it kind of looked, first of all, Zinzino introduced balance oil, then we had Extend, then Xenobiotic. It looked kind of random, but it was all part of a fiendish plan. All these things fit together. They all address this problem of chronic inflammation in slightly different ways. And Extend comes in here, because there is a third source of chronic inflammation, which is very, very important in an increasing number of people, and that is abdominal adipose tissue. Now, you know, I think, that it's better to be pear-shaped than apple-shaped. The adipose tissue that you store inside the abdomen is not very good for you because it has a tendency to be invaded by macrophages, immune cells which cause foci of inflammation and then produce compounds which leach out and go elsewhere in the body and cause inflammation everywhere else as well. So what we want to do is to try and find a way of stabilizing that abdominal adipose tissue because it's so close to the heart, it's so close to the kidneys and the liver. It's causing damage in all of these tissues. We want to try and stop the inflammation in this abdominal adipose tissue as well. And balance oil touches it. Xenobiotic doesn't have very much of an effect at all. We need a different tool to address this source of chronic inflammation. And that is what Extend is designed to do. Extend is designed to do a lot of things. But it turns out that this abdominal adipose tissue can be stabilized by a group of phytonutrients, including the tocopherols, the tocotrienols, the carotenoids, the xanthophylls, and the fat-soluble polyphenols. And all of those are in Extend. And so Extend is basically designed to stop this source of chronic inflammation. And when you do that, as Thilo was saying, with balance oil, you get huge improvements in many people's condition. Add Extend, you get further improvements. Add Xenobiotic, you get further improvements. They're designed to work together. They're designed to stop the inflammation in different parts of the body. So what we have come up with for the first time, no other supplement company has done this, no other pharmaceutical company has done this, no one's even thought of doing this. It's a systems approach to this problem of chronic inflammation that is directly caused by the reckless behavior of the food companies who dominate our diet today. So for chronic inflammation in most tissues, that is what balance oil is designed to rectify and remedy. But for chronic inflammation in the large intestine, that is where Xenobiotic comes into its own. The third source of chronic inflammation in deep abdominal tissue, and that is one of the functions that Extend has. Now, for those of you who've heard me talk in smaller groups, you know that there's a fourth source of chronic inflammation, which we are also addressing. I'm not going to talk about that today. That's a topic for perhaps the next meeting, but we're onto it. We're about 5 years ahead of any other company operating in this space, and we will continue to be. You know, right now we have a situation where the doctors are brainwashed by the pharmaceutical industry. It's a large part of their training. Their post-qualification education is dominated by the pharmaceutical industry. And the food industry sits out to one side, makes everybody sick, and the doctors then think the only way we can treat that is with pharmaceutical products. It's a mess. And public health continues to get worse. The supplement companies, what are they doing? Well, they're really insignificant. If you look at the products that the supplement companies produce, they're tokens. They're so badly formulated. I don't like the supplement industry at all. One effervescent vitamin C tablet is neither here nor there. One capsule of shoddy fish oil. One vitamin E capsule. They don't do anything. None of them have any effect at all. So here comes Zinzino. We're in the middle. We're new. We're not like any of those things. We're like a food company in some ways. We're actually very like a pharmaceutical company in many ways. We're sort of a supplement company, but we're none of those things. We're actually a pharmaconutritional company, the first one of its kind. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dominate this space. We're going to change the way the medical profession and everybody else thinks about public health. So thank you for your help in this great project. Thank you.